All right, we're back with another episode of UFC Main Event Prediction Show, and we've been doing pretty good so far. I predicted Pantoja beating Urseg, and I did falter on Nicolau versus Perez, so we've right now, we are 4-12, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, 4-11. So definitely not too bad. But let's see if we can do this. So I've noticed that in the heavyweight fights, we haven't been doing super great. We've had a lot of heavyweight and flyweight main events, and those are the ones that I've been stumbling on. So I've missed 2 flyweight main events and 2 heavyweight main events. But I got the last flyweight fight right, so let's see if I can get this heavyweight fight right. So this is actually a pretty good card. It's UFC St. Louis. I haven't really looked at it, but it's actually pretty solid. Rubelas de Spain is a fun prospect. He's just a huge heavyweight who has a bunch of quick knockouts. He's fighting against Waldo Cortez Acosta, who's kind of a prospect that the UFC has been building up. I really don't like the way Waldo fights, so I'm excited to see if Rubelas can knock him out. Alex Caceres versus Sean Woodson should be really fun. Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Rebecki that's a really cool fight in lightweight. Lonzo Menifield's pretty decent against Carlos Alberg, who's also good. Like a bunch of just solid fights on here. And in the main event, we have Derrick Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. So when I looked at Rodrigo Nascimento, he didn't really stand out to me. Like I didn't really remember him. And so I went back and I watched a few of his fights, and I do remember, now that I reviewed his fights, I do remember seeing them. And like going back and watching it, it's not surprising that I didn't remember him because he's just kind of unremarkable in general. So against Mikhail Martinek in the Contender Series, he chokes him out in round 1, so great job there. Then he fights Dontel Mays, he chokes him out in round 2. And funnily enough, he just fought him recently again, so that's 3 years later, and he won by a decision. So I don't know if Mays is getting better or if Nascimento is just getting worse, but that's kind of a notable thing. So he chokes out Dontel Mays in his UFC debut, looks pretty good. Then he fights Chris Daukaus, and he gets knocked out in round 1 with just a series of hooks, and he drops. Against Alain Baudot, he kind of gets destroyed in round 1, but then Alain Baudot gasses out and he's able to TKO Baudot in round 2. And I think this got overturned for drug use. I'm not completely sure, so don't quote me on that. Then he fights Tanner Boser in a really close fight. Basically, Tanner Boser would piece him up on the feet, then he would take Tanner down and do some pretty good ground and pound and ride out rounds that way. And so it ended up being a split decision, just like 3 close rounds. Then he fights Ilir Latifi, another split decision, kind of the same thing where, the striking was close. Ilir probably had the advantage there, but then Nascimento would take him down right on top. And then he fought Dontel Mays in kind of a lackluster decision win for him. So he's going up against the Black Beast Derrick Lewis, who has been on a bit of a rough patch lately. So let's go back to his pandemic days where he fights Ilir Latifi, that was before the pandemic. Then he fights Alexei Olenek. So that was a funny fight. Alexei took him down, spent the entire first round just cranking on his neck with a bulldog choke and submission attempts. Then Lewis survives all of that, just decides to, at the beginning of the second round, I don't feel like getting taken down again. I'm going to try to knock him out. And he knocks him out pretty easily in just 21 seconds in round number 2. Then he fights Curtis Blades. That's a matchup that a lot of people thought Lewis would lose. Curtis Blades looked really good on the stand-up. Decides to go for a level change into a double leg with no setup at all. And Derrick Lewis just times a perfect uppercut, knocking him out cold. Then he fights against Cyril Gahn, just gets completely dismantled there. Fights Chris Daukaus, just eats all of the punches Chris Daukaus throws at him, lands a big punch of his own. Then fights Tai Tuivasa, gets knocked out, fights Sergey Pavlovich, gets knocked out. Then he's fighting Sergey Spivak. Spivak takes him down and chokes him out. Then he fights Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He basically, as Tapology perfectly put it, he landed a flying knee in round 1 and then TKO'd him with ground strikes. Then he fights Jailton Almeida in a pretty boring fight. I thought it was exciting, but basically Almeida just takes him down, rides on top of him for 5 minutes every round, and wins a decision. Didn't really do any damage, but also in no point was Almeida in danger from Derrick Lewis. So immediately when I was looking at this fight, I'm like, oh, it's Derrick Lewis fighting against Rodrigo Nascimento. This guy's Brazilian. He's a grappler. He's probably going to choke out Derrick Lewis and win easily. Because if we take a look at the people that Lewis has lost to recently, Jailton Almeida's a grappler, Sergey Spivak's a grappler. But we also need to look at the fact that he's lost to good strikers too. So Tai Tuivasa, Sergey Pavlovich, Cyril Gahn. So Derrick Lewis, you can say, is on a bit of a decline. He's a little bit over the hill. Maybe people have figured him out. And I do think that if you are a good heavyweight, you should be able to easily figure out Derrick Lewis and come up with a game plan to beat him. I think Cyril Gahn did that when he fought him all the way back in 2021. He kind of saw all of the ways that people were able to beat Derrick Lewis, and he had him timed perfectly, just knew exactly what his weapons were, what to watch out for, when he was able to move in and actually go for power shots, when he needed to back out of there and get safe again. And when he was fighting Derrick Lewis in the pocket, he was just made sure to always keep a really tight, high left guard to defend against Derrick Lewis's right hook that he loves to throw and knock people out with. What is Rodrigo Nascimento's kind of game plan here? So he's a pretty well-rounded heavyweight. He has good striking, he has decent grappling. He uses his grappling a lot to, alleviate some of the pressure from the striking that his opponents are giving him and win rounds that way. So less so of actually I'm going to get this fight to the ground so I can finish you, and more so this is an area that I know I can excel in, and he'll take the fight to the ground and try to win rounds. He has good striking, and he does have TKOs on people. Again, a lot of his striking TKOs, at least the Alain Baudot one, came because Baudot was exhausted, and less of because he hits so powerful, unbelievably powerful, that he TKOs people. Will Derrick Lewis be able to beat Rodrigo Nascimento? I actually think that Derrick Lewis is going to beat Rodrigo. I think that Rodrigo's jiu-jitsu, as I said before, is good, but it's not effective enough to finish Derrick Lewis on the ground. I think that Derrick Lewis is going to be able to withstand the jiu-jitsu, probably even be able to get back up to his feet. Of course, that's before, if Derrick Lewis becomes completely exhausted the later it goes into the fight, then it's going to be harder and harder for him to get up. But we just saw Derrick Lewis fight against a Brazilian go 25 minutes, and he's really good at conserving his energy because he just doesn't try to get up. When he thinks that he can't get up, he just won't even try. And effective, that is effective. He wasn't finished by Jailton Almeida. He was able to survive a lot of his ground and pound, survive his submission attempts, and conserve his energy. And he just decided to sacrifice rounds because he knows he always has a chance to knock out his opponents. So that's actually kind of a surprisingly effective strategy that he has against grapplers. That being said, I do feel like he's going to get the sense that he can explode and get up with when Rodrigo Nascimento is on top of him. I think Rodrigo Nascimento is going to be able to get him to the ground. A lot of Nascimento's takedowns come from him kind of getting into the clinch with his opponents and then getting a body lock and going for a takedown from there. So once he's in the clinch with Derrick Lewis and he's clinched up with him, he's not going to be in as much danger as, let's say, Curtis Blades was, where Curtis Blades level changed into one of Derrick Lewis's uppercuts, or the knee is going to be there, head kicks are going to be there for Derrick Lewis. So that clinch, that body lock clinch takedown is going to be a useful tool for Nascimento. But in the clinch, I think Derrick, in that phone booth boxing, situation. I think Derrick Lewis is going to be able to land strikes on Nascimento. And I think Derrick Lewis is going to knock him out. Nascimento gets hit way too much for my liking. And I think that Derrick Lewis isn't going to let him up. He gets hurt a lot. He got hurt against Tanner Boser. He got hurt against Ilir Latifi. If he gets hurt by someone like Derrick Lewis isn't going to let him recover. And I think he's going to actually knock out Nascimento in this fight. I'm going to predict maybe a second or third round knockout for Derrick Lewis. Probably will just get taken down, work to get his way back up to the feet, and then from there just kind of catch Nascimento, because Nascimento is content to strike with his opponents, and I think that's almost going to be a false sense of security that he's going to get from Derrick Lewis when Derrick Lewis shells up. Derrick Lewis doesn't take punches well. He has big reactions, and I think that's going to kind of motivate Nascimento, cause him to open up even more, and make him even more vulnerable to be hit with that counter left hook that Derrick Lewis loves to give. So yeah, I'm going to go with my official prediction as Nascimento Derrick Lewis knocking out Nascimento. And let's see what the odds are here. I'm not 100% I'm not 100% solid on this prediction, but I really do think that Derrick Lewis has a better path to victory than Nascimento does. Simply because Nascimento's jiu-jitsu hasn't ever looked that great, and he gets hit a lot. Oh, and surprisingly enough, I thought Derrick Lewis would be an underdog, but he is a minus 166 favorite. So that's actually kind of surprising. I would rate this fight at about even, because Nascimento does get hit a lot. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is so he's on basically a 4-fight win streak, right? Like, he TKO'd Alan Badeau. I don't know why that was overturned to no contest. Then he fights Tanner Boser. You can easily argue that was a loss. Then he fights Ilir Latifi. You can easily argue that one was a loss. Then he fights Dontel Mays, who's really bad and who he's already beaten before. So this is a bit of a false confident win streak for Rodrigo Nascimento. You can argue that he's just 2-3 in his last 5 instead of this 4-fight win streak. And these also just these names aren't at the level that Derrick Lewis is in the division. And again, Nascimento gets hit a lot, and I think Derrick Lewis is going to land on him and hurt him. Let's just take a look at their records. He's 6'2", 80-inch reach, 31 years old. Derrick Lewis is 39 years old, 6'3", 79-inch reach. So pretty much the same height and reach, with Derrick Lewis being 8 years older. But again, at a heavyweight, he's not going to age as badly as a 40-year-old lightweight. So anyway, guys, really quick one this week. Just wanted to get this out there before the fight started. Let me know who you think is going to win. Let me know what you thought of my prediction. And let's see if we can actually predict a heavyweight fight correct, because I don't think I've predicted any of the heavyweights right so far this year. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day and enjoy the fights.